As always, the official docs are a great place to learn all about tabs. There on the bottom of that components documentation, you find the ion tabs element. Now, it is worth pointing out that you use them a little bit different when working with Angular than it's documented here, and I'll explain you how you work with it. But the general idea is the same. So how do you work with tabs then? First of all, let me get rid of the padding so that we don't have any extra padding on that page. I don't need that. And then you add tabs by adding that ion tabs component. That is your wrapper around your entire tabbing logic. Then you need to add an ion tab bar, and that basically allows you to define which buttons you want to have, which actual tabs with which text and which icons you want to have. That ion tab bar must receive a slot of bottom here so that it's correctly positioned at the bottom of the page. Inside of the ion tab bar, you then add your ion tab button components, which will allow you to set up the different buttons in your tab bar. And each tab button needs to get a unique identifier which you assign with the tab attribute. And in our case, with the places, we'll have, let's say, discover, but you can choose whatever you want here. And I'll also add my second tab button, and there I'll add a tab attribute with a value of offers. Again, this is totally up to you. Now you can add text and or icons to your tabs, and I'll add both. You add text by adding an ion label, and then in between you just enter whichever text you want to display, like discover. You can also then add an ion icon, and here I'll use a name of search, which should give us a nice search icon. For the second tab, I'll add my ion label with text of offer or offers. Makes more sense since we might have multiple places offered. And then also my ion icon with a name of card here. That is actually a nice icon I picked in advance that fits quite well. Of course, you can always go to ionicons.com and search for your own icons you could use here. And now the part that differs. If you follow the official docs, then you would now also add the ion tab elements here, where you actually use the same identifiers you used on the tab buttons to then control which content gets displayed for which button that is pressed. With Angular, that works a bit different. You don't add ion tab, and indeed ion tab at this time is not even supported here. Instead, Angular will automatically insert the right page based on the button you pressed. And to ensure that Angular is able of doing that, you just have to make sure that you match this tab identifier you're setting up here in your routing setup. And for that, we first of all need to tune our routing setup, of course. We do that in the places module because that is the place responsible for the places page. And in there, currently, we have one route. Now we'll add more routes, and therefore I'll actually do something which is totally optional, but which is a good practice. I'll outsource my routes here into a new module, into my places-routing module TypeScript file. And that is a similar pattern we have for the main routes with the app routing module as well. In the places routing module, I'll export a class which is named places routing module. And the duty of that class is to get the ng module decorator. And if that is something you never saw before, as always, check out my complete guide about Angular. There you'll learn all about Angular modules and what's up with them. And on this ng module here, I will now import the router module. And that is coming from @AngularRouter. So nothing Ionic specific. That still is Angular routing we're using. The idea is that we here set up some child routes with for child, which are then basically merged with the global route definition once this module is lazy loaded. We also need to export our router module here without for child being called again though. So this is now the router module with the new configuration, you could say. Now for the routes, I'll add my routes constant, which will be of type routes, and routes, just as router module, needs to be imported from @AngularRouter. That is an array of our route objects. So again, just plain old Angular logic. Now in that object here, in the first object, I want to set a path which I'll name tabs. And you could name this place tabs as well, whatever you want. I'll just name it tabs. The component I want to render for this path is my places component, because that will actually be the component. Excuse me, places page is the name. That is the component in the end that has my tabs, and that is important. So here you want to render that component that holds your tabs. And of course, you need to import that component here. Now that will have a couple of children, a couple of child routes. And now that is an important pattern. The page, the component where you have your ion tabs element, needs to have some child routes. And now for these child routes, we'll have to make sure that we adjust them correctly to meet our identifiers we added on our tab buttons. How do we do that? Well, we add again just an object to configure a path, and the path here now has to match one of these identifiers, because Ionic behind the scenes will then look for such a path when this button is pressed. So here I'll now add discover as a path. And discover for me will actually then just be a wrapper with more child routes, because in these child routes I'll now have both my discover main page where we see all the places we can book, but I'll then also have another child which will be my place detail page, so to say. So I'll have an empty path in there, and there I want to lazy load my discover module, so the discover page. I do that by pointing at the discover folder and then the discover module, and in there without .ts, that's important, and then a hashtag and then discover module. So you basically now need to enter the name of this class, discover page module it is, here after the hashtag. And that is how you set up lazy loading in Angular, relative path from this file on. That allows us to use lazy loading even inside of tabs. That means if we never press a tab button, the code for the page that is loaded when you press it will not be downloaded unnecessarily, which is of course great. So that is my first route, which is a child of discover. And in the end, we reach this by simply typing /tabs/discover, you could say, or actually /places/tabs/discover, since this whole module is only loaded after we visited /places already. So now then we load this discover page. Now the other child page I have here, which should start with /places/tabs/discover, is the page with a path of place ID. And that is a dynamic parameter, hence the colon, because we'll have different places with different IDs, and I want to show my place detail page here, and I want to pass the ID as a parameter in the URL. And that is also something we already saw in an earlier module, and that is also just how it works in Angular in general. Here again, I'll set up lazy loading by going to /discover, and there now to the place detail folder, and there to the place detail module. Without .ts, it's important that you remove that, otherwise this path will be resolved incorrectly. And then you add a hashtag and then the name of this module. So let's go in there, let's copy and paste that name. It's place detail page module, and let's add it here after the hashtag. Perfect. So now we have that set up. This is my discover area. Of course, I also have offers, and that will now be a sibling to the discover route object. Here I have a path of offers, and again, this path now needs to match your button tab attribute here. Otherwise, it will not be loaded correctly. Here, I'll then also add children, because I want to have a couple of routes that actually start with /places/tabs/offers. And the first child route I'll add is, again, just an empty path for just /places/tabs/offers. And there I'll lazy load the offers module, so that main offers page. Again, without TS here, and then just as before, make sure you do copy the right name here so that lazy loading works correctly. So let's copy that and add it here after the hashtag. Now feel free to pause the videos and add routes for the other files we have here. You'll need to pass some dynamic parameters for some of the other routes, for example, for editing or reviewing the details. After the short pause, which I give you to pause this video, we'll do it together. So, were you successful? Let's do it together now. So we have that first route here already. Now I also want to be able to create new offers, and I'll do this with a path of new. Here you can choose any path you want, of course. And again, load children, and then I'll go into the offers folder, then into new offer, and then load my new offer module. And as before, make sure you do type or copy the correct module name, otherwise routing will break. So now, after a hashtag, I load the new offer page module. Now, besides that, I'll have two other routes. The first one is the route for editing. Here I'll have edit/place ID. So that is actually a path that consists of two segments. The first one is hard-coded, but the second one is a dynamic segment, because when I edit a place, I need to get its ID, and I will pass that ID through the URL. The rest is not that difficult. I will lazy load it from the offers folder, edit offer module TS without TS, and then it's the edit offer page module that should be loaded here. And after that, there's one more route to go, and that is just :place ID. That is for the details page, where I basically can see all the bookings for my offer. So here I'll implement load children /offers /offer bookings module, and then hashtag offer bookings page module. Now, one important note, the order here matters. The hard-coded paths have to go before the ones with the dynamic segments, because if you would have a reverse order, when you go to something like /new and you have place ID, :place ID in front of that, well, then new would be treated as a value for place ID, and this route would be loaded instead of this route. So hard-coded routes first. With that, the routing setup is complete. Now let's pass the routes to router module for child here. And then let's import our place routing module into the places module. There we can therefore get rid of that route setup we had in there before. We can get rid of that entire Angular router import here. Can also get rid of the forms module, by the way, right now. We're currently not using forms here, and you could delete it for all the other modules too at the moment. And then here in imports, I'll just import my places routing module, and you need to add the import path here as well. So now let's save that and let it recompile. And then go back to the Ionic app here and reload it. And we're not seeing anything, do we? Well, that is because we're using lazy loading. There's one thing we need to adjust in the places routing module. There we have that big tabs object here in the end, where we have all these nested tabs pages. Next to that big tabs path or route object here, you need to add a new route object with a path of empty, which is triggered when you're going to just /places, so to say. And there, you should redirect to /places /tabs /discover to start on that discover page, or of course redirect to another page if you want to start there. Important here, you need to set path match to full, so that this only kicks in if we're really just going to /places and not to /places /something else. And we need a similar redirection actually in here inside of our tabs. There we have the discover and the offer part. In there, you should also add an empty path for cases where we go to just /places /tabs. There, I also want to redirect to /places /tabs /discover and also set path match to full. So with these two redirections set up here, let's now save that and wait for the compilation to finish. And now we can see something. It's still not the final output I want to have, but we can see that we have the discover page active here. If I go to offers, we see the offers page. So that's looking good. We can also see that lazy loading works. If we open the network tab, go back to discover, reload here, and then clear the network log, and now I go to offers, you see that is downloaded separately. So that's lazy loading in action. But what about that extra navigation bar? Well, the fix is simple. in your places page HTML file where you have your tabs, you should actually only have your tabs. So get rid of the ion header and also of ion content and just have ion tabs in here. And now with that, if you save it, this will reload and we'll get rid of that extra header. And this is now the look and feel I want to build up on. And this is how you can implement tabs in your application.